We're looking at some of the main changes under GDPR. There's several of them, so we'll take them through one at a time. We'll start with the change to the penalties. Under the Data Protection Act, the maximum fine that could be issued by the ICO is £500,000. And whilst that sounds like a lot of money, you have to remember that this was something that was set 20 years ago in 1998, when £500,000 was a huge amount of money to any company. Nowadays, £500,000 is not a huge sum to the really big organisations, and so GDPR has changed those penalties. In addition, in that 20 years, the £500,000 maximum fine has never actually been issued. The largest fine so far issued was £400,000, which was in 2017 to TalkTalk for the big TalkTalk fiasco, which we'll all remember. That affected millions of people, putting financial data at risk. If that wasn't sufficient for a maximum fine, I'm not sure what really is. GDPR changes things. The maximum fines under GDPR are now €20 million, or 4% of the global turnover of the organisation. And by global turnover, that's the turnover of all companies, all organisations under their umbrella. To put that in perspective, for Microsoft, that could be almost a €4 billion fine. More locally, for Capita, who provide SIMs to schools in England, that could be, for a really serious breach, a fine of almost €200 million. Schools are not going to see these fines. In 20 years of the Data Protection Act, no school has ever received a fine from the ICO. And the Information Commissioner herself, Liz Denham, has made it very clear that she sees fines as the absolute last resort. She wants to help us become compliant, not to penalise us for failing to be. That said, there's been a lot of myths out there that say schools are going to be made bankrupt, etc. It's not going to happen. Those fines won't happen. Not for us in schools. However, there will be enforcement notices. If we do things wrong, if we have a data breach, then the ICO will issue an enforcement notice. And that enforcement can take all kinds of different forms. It may be that we have to change our policies or our procedures on a particular area. We may have to put staff on training courses. We may have to get consent for something that we didn't think we needed consent for. But most importantly, whatever that enforcement is, we will have to comply with it, and it becomes public knowledge. It's published on the ICO's website so that everybody can see what we've done wrong. And that obviously affects our status in the area, and it can also affect our status with our staff, our parents, our pupils, who will then be worried about what else we're doing wrong with their data. Going forward, the other thing that GDPR brings in is the idea of having personal compensation where there's a data breach or where somebody uses our data incorrectly. Whilst I can see the benefits of being able to go after the marketing companies and the PPI companies who continually use my data for no reason and get compensation for the way they're annoying me and distressing me by all their calls, it does also affect us in schools. It means that if we do something wrong, if there is a data breach, we expose somebody's data, we use it the wrong way, that person can sue us for personal compensation. Now at this stage, we've no idea what that compensation is going to be. We're going to have to wait until the first cases start to go through the courts after the enforcement in May. If those cases that go through get very low levels of compensation, then we don't have a huge thing to worry about. We still want to protect the data, we don't want to fall foul of it, but it's not going to be huge dents in our budget. But if it were even a reasonable sum, say £1,000 was granted as compensation, you can almost hear the adverts already. No win, no fee solicitors coming out the woodwork. Have you had data used in a bad way? Has there been a data breach that exposed your data and caused you distress? We can get you compensation. And if that happens, there's a danger that they can also use class action suits, which means they could get everybody who's been affected and sue us for all of those at the same time. In a school situation, that could be hundreds of students who've had their data exposed by mistake, and if they all sued us at the same time, 500 or 600 students getting £1,000 compensation would be a big impact on our budget. So it's really important that we make sure we are compliant, we try to minimise the risks of data breaches, and keep ourselves well clear of any of this personal compensation.